Hello everyone, and welcome to another video. Today we are going to continue and we are going to finish talking about the legislative branch of the government. And we are going to finish this section on the legislative branch of the government by talking about, I'm going to be honest with you guys, this is probably the most complicated, convoluted thing we are going to talk about all year. Now, I know I'm probably starting off on a bad note by saying that, and I don't want anybody to get nervous or anxious or worked up or scared of this, because I'm going to go through it. I'll explain everything as best I can, but if this doesn't really sink in the first time, this might be something you have to go back and look at again. And I will review this with you, and I know that this is not an easy topic, the process by which a bill becomes a law. I will be providing additional resources through Schoology to reinforce this topic. There's some good charts and graphs that kind of show the process, and I know that some people, if they see a chart or a graph that shows the way that a bill becomes a law, it kind of sinks in easier. That's a better way for me to grasp it. So if this video doesn't, if you're still kind of puzzled by the end of it, don't worry, I'm going to be providing more materials through Schoology, so just check there, and that will help you out. Also, I haven't even started, and I'm sure you've already saw how long this video is going to be. It's going to be a long one, and the next one is too. I do apologize for that. I hate making these long drawn out videos, but this is a big topic, so let's go ahead and get started. Let's try to get through this and make it as painless as possible. So, Congress at work making laws. The first steps. These numbers may surprise you. From 6,000 to 9,000 bills and resolutions are introduced in the House and Senate during each session of Congress. Fewer than 10% become law. Where do all these measures come from? Why are so few of them passed? How by process does Congress make law? The first steps. A union representative delivers a petition in favor of immigration reform to the office of House Committee on Foreign Affairs Chairman Ed Royce, hoping to influence his vote. So this is one way that ideas for new bills and laws are put in place, by petitions from ordinary citizens. A bill is a proposed law presented to the House or Senate for consideration. Most of the bills introduced in either house do not originate with members themselves. Instead, however, many of the most important bills are born somewhere in the executive branch. Business, labor, agriculture, and other special interest groups often draft measures as well. And some bills, or at least the ideas for them, come from private citizens who think there ought to be a law. Many others are born in the standing committees of Congress. So a lot of these ideas that for laws originate in the executive branch, or from, like I said earlier, from petitions from ordinary citizens. Now, this is not to say that the executive branch can make laws. They can have ideas, and they can propose those ideas to their colleagues in the legislative branch, but if the, let's say, Secretary of Agriculture wants a bill to promote corn farming, let's say, no matter how much he wants that bill, no matter how much he wants that law, the Secretary of Agriculture does not have any authority to make laws. Now, he can call up his friends in the House of Representatives and say, hey, this is a bill that you should draft, here's what I think about it, I'm an expert in this field, here's my support for it. He might do everything short of write the bill for them. But he can't present it, he can't get the process rolling himself. It has to start with a member of the House of Representatives or the Senate. Now, private citizens, like I said, they can submit a petition for it, but if no representative or senator wants to take that bill up, well, it's just kind of dead. Of course, the people can threaten to not vote for them if they don't pay their petition any mind. You know, most legislators want to be reelected. They want to keep doing what they're doing. So they will tend to listen to a petition if it has enough support. Now, if you and 3 people want this bill passed and nobody else gives it a second thought, probably not going to get too much attention from a legislator. Now, if you and 1,500 other people in the state want a bill passed, well, then now you're starting to talk numbers that will get some attention. According to Article 1, Section 7, Clause 1 of the Constitution, bills for raising revenue shall originate in the House. In other words, tax bills must first be acted upon by the House. Now, I'm going to pause here for just a moment. Anytime it says House or the House, that means House of Representatives. Measures dealing with any other matter may be introduced in either chamber. Only members can introduce bills in the House. They do so by dropping them into the hopper, a box hanging on the edge of the clerk's desk. Often before a member introduces a bill, he or she will circulate a letter informing other members about the measure and why its sponsor thinks it should become law. That is, he or she hopes to persuade several other members to become co-sponsors, thereby increasing the chances that the bill will be passed. By the time many measures are introduced in either house, a number of members are listed on them as co-sponsors. So if, let's say that you are a legislator and you want to get a bill passed, well, you're going to, and you're working on this bill, you know, these are quite lengthy documents. You're going to, you know, spread the word, tell your colleagues and other people who might be of similar ideas to you that you're working on this bill, that you're writing this bill up, and, you know, you'd really appreciate if they would support your bill. You know, and if you tell them what it's about, and if they say, oh, well, that's a good idea, they'll sign on. And the more legislators that you have to sign on to support a bill, the more strength it has. You know, just like a petition. If you and 2 friends sign a petition, and that's all the signatures on a petition you get, it's not going to go anywhere. But if you, 2 friends, and if you're petitioning the mayor of your city, and you get 80% of the population of the city to sign this petition, it's going to get some attention. Just the same here. If one legislator signs a bill, it may not get any attention. Now, if it's in the Senate and you get 40 senators to sign on, it's going to get a lot of attention. So the more people that you have supporting this bill, the more attention it's going to get, the stronger it's going to be. Public and private bills. The thousands of measures, bills, and resolutions Congress considers take several forms. To begin with, there are 2 types of bills, public bills and private bills. Public bills are measures applying to the nation as a whole. For example, a tax measure. Private bills are measures that apply to certain persons or places rather than to the entire nation. As an example, Congress once passed an act to give a sheep rancher $85,000 for his losses resulting from attacks by grizzly bears. The bears had been moved from Yellowstone National Park to other public lands on which the rancher grazed his flock. So, that would be considered a private bill because it doesn't apply to the whole nation. They weren't giving money to every rancher in the nation due to these grizzly bears. They were only giving it to one. So, a public bill is something that applies to everybody. Private is just one person. Think of it like property. Public property, anybody can go there. Private property, only the owner and people with permission can be there. So, that's how you can keep them separate. Public property, public bills, applies to everybody. Anybody can go there. Private property, private bills, only for a select number of people. Okay, joint resolutions are similar to bills and when passed have the force of law. They most often deal with unusual or temporary matters, for example, to appropriate money for the presidential inauguration ceremonies. Joint resolutions are used as well to propose constitutional amendments, and they have also been used to annex territories. So these don't come up very often. These are unusual and temporary. Concurrent resolutions deal with the matters in which the House and Senate must act jointly. However, they do not have the force of law and do not require the President's signature. Concurrent resolutions are used most often by Congress to state a position on some matter. For example, in foreign affairs. So a concurrent resolution doesn't have any real authority. It's just kind of like an official statement put out by Congress. Resolutions, often called simple resolutions, deal with matters concerning either house alone and are taken up only by that body. They are regularly used for such matters as the adoption of a new rule of procedure or the amendment of some existing rule. Like concurrent resolutions, a resolution does not have the force of law and is not sent to the President for approval. So these are smaller actions of Congress. You know, this isn't a new law, this isn't some sweeping reform that's going to revolutionize the country or anything like that. These are smaller things, and those are just called resolutions. You know, they don't have to go to the President, they don't have to have all of the approval that a bill does. So these are resolutions, are just little simple things. Riders and pork. A bill or resolution often deals with a single subject, but sometimes a rider dealing with an unrelated matter is included. A rider is a provision not likely to pass on its own merit that is attached to an important measure certain to pass. Its sponsors hope that it will ride through the legislative process on the strength of the main measure. These riders are also sometimes referred to as pork. So I want to take a moment to talk about pork, riders, and the man in this picture, Robert C. Byrd. Now, his name alone should ring a bell to you. This man's name, since you are all, you know, if you are my students that are watching this video, as residents of the state of West Virginia, the name Robert C. Byrd should sound familiar to you. You've probably seen his name on maybe the Robert C. Byrd Bridge or the Robert C. Byrd Highway, Robert C. Byrd, I don't know. I'm sure there's a hospital somewhere with his name on it. His name is on a lot of public things in the state of West Virginia. The reason for that is he is the longest serving senator from any state, and he is the longest serving senator for West Virginia. He was also known as the King of Pork. Now, this, depending on how you look at it, might be a title to be proud of. It might also be something that is seen as a bit of a slam on him. He was known for these riders and adding this pork to bills. So let's talk about a bridge. Let's talk about Robert C. Byrd Bridge. I'm sure there's one in the state somewhere, probably multiple. Now, there might be a bill up, let's say, to provide funding to NASA. That is a government function. So there's this bill that is in the Senate, and it says now it is the Senate, the purpose of this bill is to provide funding to NASA. And if you're reading the bill and you go on down, and then at the bottom, there's this line that says provides some amount of money for the construction of a bridge in West Virginia. Now, tell me, what does a bridge in West Virginia have to do with funding for NASA? Nothing. They're not related in the slightest. You know, NASA isn't located in West Virginia. They're not going to use that bridge. You know, so why is it here? Well, it's a small thing that is added to a big bill. the Senate is going to pass that funding bill for NASA. NASA is going to get their money to continue doing their research. Now, whenever that bill passes, that is also going to get that funding into West Virginia to build that bridge. And Robert C. Byrd was famous for adding these these riders to bills. He did it all the time. It's what he was known for. And that's why if you drive across the state of West Virginia, I guarantee you are going to come across Robert C. Byrd bridges, Robert C. Byrd highways, Robert C. Byrd museums, Robert C. Byrd hospitals. I'm sure there's a Robert C. Byrd hospital somewhere. So these exist. These Robert C. Byrd branded buildings exist somewhere because he got the funding for them. And typically, if they would name it after him as sort of like a thank you for his service of getting that to them. But he was known for it. He's famous for it, and he is. Now he did pass away a few years ago, but that's what pork is. Most riders are tacked onto appropriate measures and are often called earmarks. In fact, some money bills have so many riders attached that they are called Christmas trees. The opponents of these decorations and the president are almost always forced to accept them if they want the bill's major provisions to become law. Like I said, they will attach these riders, these pork, to bills that are pretty much a sure thing to pass. You know, there's going to be some bills that come up in Senate, most likely funding bills, that are sure to pass. A bill to fund the Veterans Affairs hospitals is sure to pass. Nobody's going to vote that down. So they will add these sort of, well, let's get some funding to build a school. Let's write that in there. Let's get, we got a highway that's kind of crumbling. Let's add that to the bill as well. What does that have to do with the Veterans Affairs hospitals? Nothing. But doesn't matter. It's sure to pass, and that funding is needed. Introduction and first reading. The clerk of the House numbers each bill as it is introduced. Thus, H.R. 3410 would be the 3,410th measure introduced in the House during the congressional term. Bills originating in the Senate receive the prefix S, such as S-210. Resolutions are similarly identified in each House in the order of their introduction. So if you ever hear people talking about an idea in the Senate and they refer to it as, and I'm just going to make up numbers here, H.R. 732, it's a bill that originated in the House of Representatives, and it is the 732nd bill during that term of Congress. So, if you've ever wondered why you may hear on the news people talk about, oh, well, there was hot debate on Senate Bill S534. S534, what does that mean? It's a Senate bill, and it is the whatever number I just said, that bill, that in that order. The clerk also gives each bill a short title, a brief summary of the principal contents. Having received its number and title, the bill is then entered in the House Journal and in the Congressional Record for the day. There is a running record of every bill that has ever been debated in the Senate and the House. And if you ever care to go look that up, it is public records. You can see what was said, and that is a long-running document. So you're going to have to be either very dedicated or very bored to want to have to go look through that. The journal contains the minutes, the official record of the daily proceedings in the House or Senate. The Congressional Record is a voluminous account of the daily proceedings, speeches, debates, other comments, votes, motions, etc. in each House. The record is not quite a word-for-word account. However, members have 5 days in which to make changes in each temporary edition. They often insert speeches that were, in fact, never made, reconstruct debates, and revise thoughtless or inaccurate remarks. With these actions, the bill has received its first reading. All bills are printed immediately after introduction and distributed to all members of the House. Each bill that is finally passed in either House is given 3 readings along the legislative route. In the House, second reading comes during floor consideration, if the measure gets that far. Third reading takes place just before the final vote on the measure. Each reading is usually by number and title only. H.R. 3410, a bill to provide ... However, the more important or controversial bills are read in full and taken up line by line, section by section, at second reading. Now obviously this process can take a long time. The 3 readings in ancient parliamentary practice are intended to ensure careful consideration of bills. Today the readings are little more than way stations along the legislative route. They were quite important in the early history of Congress, however, when some members could not read. In the early history of our Congress, we had people making laws that could not read. It was a different time, folks. After the first reading, the Speaker refers the bill to one or more of the standing committees. A bill's content largely determines where it will go. The Speaker does have some discretion, however, particularly over complex measures with provisions covering a number of subjects. Which committee gets a bill can matter. For example, a controversial provision in the bill might receive a more favorable welcome in one committee than it might in another. So depending on the context of the bill and what it includes will determine what committee gets it. The bill in committee. The Constitution makes no mention of standing committees. These bodies do play an absolutely essential role in the lawmaking process, however, and in both houses of Congress. Indeed, their place is so pivotal that they are sometimes called little legislatures. The standing committee act as filters. They sift through all of the many bills referred to them, rejecting most, considering and reporting only those they find to be worthy of floor consideration. In short, the fate of most bills is decided in these committees rather than on the floor of either house. Most of the thousands of bills introduced in each session of Congress are pigeonholed. That is, they are buried, they die in committee. They are simply put away, never to be acted upon. The term comes from the old-fashioned roll-top desks with pigeonholes, or slots into which papers were put and often soon forgotten. Most, by request, bills are routinely pigeonholed. They are the measures that members introduce, but only because some constituent or some interest group has asked them to do so. So a lot of bills that go into committee die there. They either the committee has deemed that they are not a worthwhile endeavor, and they are just sort of put away to just, they don't vote them down, they just kind of shove them in a drawer and forget about them. So that is what it means to be whenever they pigeonhole a bill. So now these committees are often made up of members that have certain experience in different fields. So if a senator has a long history, let's say maybe they're a doctor, and then a bill comes up that has something to do with some sort of medical research, well, they're probably going to have that senator that's also a doctor, that has worked as a doctor, on that committee to discuss that bill. The term pigeonholed originally referred to the practice of shelving items in the pigeonholes of a desk. So if you've ever seen an old-time desk that looks like this one here, those little holes that you see up there are what were called pigeonholes. Most pigeonholed bills do deserve their fate. On occasion, however, a committee buries a measure that a majority of the members of the House want to consider. When that happens, the bill can be blasted out of the committee with a discharge petition. A discharge petition enables members to force a bill that has remained in committee 30 days, 7 in the Rules Committee, onto the floor for a consideration. Any member may file a discharge motion. If that motion is signed by a majority, 218, of House members, the committee has 7 days to report the bill. If it does not, any member who signed the motion may, on the second and fourth Mondays of each month, move that the bill be discharged from the committee that is sent to the floor. If the motion carries, the rules require the House to consider the bill at once. This maneuver is not often tried, and it seldom succeeds. So if a committee has pigeonholed a bill, but then a large group of members of the House of Representatives say that they want to discuss that bill, they can file one of these discharge petitions to forcibly bring it out of committee and bring it to the floor for a debate. Now, often these discharge petitions don't work, because if a lot of representatives will trust the members of that committee as sort of the experts in that field, and it's like, well, if they don't think it's worthwhile, then why should I? So while this process exists, it does not happen very often. The process was most recently successful in 2002, however. What went on to become the Bipartisan Campaign Reform Act of 2002 was blasted out of the Committee on House Administration, where the House leadership had managed to bury it for several years. That measure marked the first major change in federal campaign finance law in 23 years. A subcommittee's work. Once a bill reaches a committee, the chairman almost always refers it to one of several subcommittees. For an important or controversial measure, a committee, or most often one of its subcommittees, holds public hearings. Interested parties, including the representatives of interest groups, public officials, and others, are invited to testify at these information-gathering sessions. If necessary, a committee can issue a subpoena, forcing a witness to testify. A subpoena is an order compelling one to testify and/or produce evidence. Failure to obey a subpoena may lead the House or Senate to cite the offender for contempt of Congress, a federal crime punishable by a fine and/or imprisonment. Occasionally, a subcommittee will make a trip to locations affected by a measure. Thus, several members of the House Foreign Affairs Committee Subcommittee on the Western Hemisphere may visit Rio de Janeiro for a first-hand look at Brazil's successful efforts to reduce that country's dependence on foreign oil. So if a subcommittee deems that they need to go somewhere to gain first-hand experience, that is something that can be done. Now, this doesn't happen very often because a lot of people and a lot of people in public will look at this as them like taking a vacation on the taxpayers' money. And I mean, if a group of senators got together and then traveled across the world, you know, it would look kind of suspicious. Even if it was done with good intention, that would look suspicious. Committee actions. When a subcommittee has completed its work on a bill, the measure goes to the full committee. At the chairman's direction, that body may do one of several things. It may, and here are 5 options. 1. Report the bill favorably with a do pass recommendation. It is then the chairman's job to steer the bill through debate on the floor. 2. Refuse to report the bill. That is, to pigeonhole it. Again, this is the fate suffered by most measures in both houses. 3. Report the bill in amended form. Many bills are changed in committee, and several bills on the same subject may be combined into a single measure. 4. Report the bill with an unfavorable recommendation. This does not often happen. Occasionally, however, a committee feels that the full House should have a chance to consider a bill or does not want to take the responsibility for killing it. 5. Report a committee bill. The panel produces a substantially rewritten measure as a substitute for one or several of the bills referred to it. So those are all options that a committee can take. So here is a graph that shows some numbers here of 10,778 measures introduced. 10,778 measures introduced in the 111th Congress. Only 383 became law. That is a very small percent. So, of all of these measures introduced, only 1,315 passed into committee, and 970, and of those, 971 came out of committee, and 383 were all that was voted into law. So, as you can see, a lot of bills die in this process. They just don't pass. They don't get the support that they need to pass, and it just dies. Before it goes to the floor for consideration, a bill reported by a standing committee is placed on one of several calendars in the House. A calendar is a schedule of the order in which bills will be taken up on the floor. The purpose of 5 calendars. There are 5 calendars in the lower house. The calendar of the Committee of the Whole House on the State of the Union, commonly known as the Union Calendar, is for all bills having to do with revenues, appropriations, or government property. The House Calendar is for all other public bills. The Private Calendar is for all private bills. The Corrections Calendar is for all bills from the Union or House Calendar taken out of order by unanimous consent of the House of Representatives. There are most often minor bills to which there is no opposition. The Discharge Calendar is for petitions to discharge bills from committee. But remember that discharge petition thing doesn't happen very often. Under the rules of the House, bills are taken from each of these calendars for consideration on a regularly scheduled basis. For example, bills from the Corrections Calendar are supposed to be considered on the 2nd and 4th Tuesdays of each month. Measures relating to the District of Columbia can be taken up on the 2nd and 4th Mondays, and private bills on the 1st and 3rd Tuesdays. On calendar Wednesdays, the various committees' chairmen may each call up one bill from the House or Union calendars that has cleared their committees. So that is just something about these calendars that exist. Guys, I added this here because it was in the book, but this isn't going to be on a test. I'm just going to go ahead and tell you it's not going to be on a test. It was in the book, so I added it, but I don't think it's really necessary. This is what an old one of these calendars would look like. That is where there would be scheduled meetings. This was back in 1998. The Powerful Rules Committee. None of these arrangements is followed too closely, however. What most often happens is even more complicated. Remember that the Rules Committee plays a critical role in the legislative process in the House. It must grant a rule before most bills can, in fact, reach the floor. That is, before most measures can be taken from a calendar, the Rules Committee must approve that step and set a time for its appearance on the floor. By not granting a rule for a bill, the Rules Committee can effectively kill it. Or, when the Rules Committee does grant a rule, it may be a special rule, one setting conditions under which the members of the House will consider the measure. A special rule often sets a time limit on floor debate. It may even prohibit amendments to certain or even to any of the bill's provisions. So here is just another committee that a bill has to go through where it can be killed. Are you seeing why there are so many bills that are proposed, but so few actually make it through? Then too, certain bills are privileged. That is, they may be called up almost any time ahead of any other business before the House. The most privileged measures include major appropriations or spending bills and general revenue or tax bills. Conference committee reports and special rules granted by the Rules Committee. On certain days, the House may suspend its rules. A motion to that effect must be approved by a 2/3 vote of the members present. When that happens, as it sometimes does, the House moves so far away from its established operating procedures that a measure can go through all the many steps necessary to enactment in a single day. So while there are all of these steps in place, if there is some sort of special condition that a bill is needed to pass right away or needed to be discussed right away, they can bypass all of these and go right to House or right to the floor debate. All of these, the calendars, the rules, the role of the Rules Committee, and the other complex procedures have developed over time to help members of the House manage their heavy workload. Because of the large size of the House and the sheer number and variety of bills its members introduce, no one member could possibly know the contents, let alone the merits of every bill on which he or she has to vote. There's just simply too much. If a bill finally reaches the floor, it receives its second reading in the House. Many bills the House passes are minor ones, with little or no opposition. Most of these less important measures are called from the corrections calendar, get their second reading by title only, and are quickly disposed of. So a lot of bills are minor, and they will just pass through quickly. Nearly all of the more important measures are dealt with in a much different manner. They are considered in the Committee of the Whole, an old parliamentary device for speeding process on the floor. The Committee of the Whole includes all the members of the House sitting as one large committee of the House, not as the House itself. The rules of the Committee of the Whole are much less strict than the rules of the House, and floor action moves along at a faster pace. For example, a quorum, which is a majority of the full membership, 218, must be present in order for the House to do business. Only 100 members need be present in the Committee of the Whole. When the House resolves itself into the Committee of the Whole, the Speaker steps down because the full House of Representatives is no longer in session. Another member presides. General debate begins and the bill receives its second reading, section by section. As each section is read, amendments may be offered under the 5-minute rule. Supporters and opponents of each amendment have just that many minutes to make their cases. Votes are taken on each section and its amendment as the reading proceeds. When the bill has been gone through, and many run to dozens and sometimes hundreds of pages, the Committee of the Whole has completed its work. It then rises, that is, dissolves itself. Presto, the House is now back in session. The Speaker resumes the chair, and the House formally adopts the committee's work. Alright guys, I know this is a long video, and I'm going to end it there. If you have any questions, you know how to get a hold of me. I hope everybody's having a great day, and I'll see you again real soon.